views shared in this episode represent Kelli and Kendra, not our mamas, partners, church, job, or sponsors. Hi, Kel. So, I was looking at the show prep for our show that we are about to kick off today, which is sort of an introduction to womanist theology. Not necessarily in like a 101 course format, but introducing two womanist pastors or ministers or reverends or however you want to name them, title them, who have been really instrumental in both of our lives and our understanding of womanist theology and our understanding of Black women leading in faith spaces. Yeah. So on my end, the Reverend Cynthia Layton, my aunt, my mom's baby sister, who was called to ministry. Well, she'll talk about when she was called to ministry, but started out working. I always knew my aunt to be a general manager of like big box retail stores, right? When I was younger, we go there. We probably go there, but she worked at Target for a long time. She was a GM at Target.
Oh, wow.
She was at Burlington, all these things. She was managing stores, and then, she was called to ministry full time, and also she's a teacher and a professor. So I'm so happy that we get to talk to her today.
Yeah, and then we get to talk to Reverend Dr. Vanessa Monroe, who is my pastor here in Houston. She is the reason that I am a member of a church again, because I hadn't been for a long time. She is a Black woman. She's a lawyer. She's an engineer, entrepreneur, and started pastoring here in Houston several years ago, and leads our church and also leads our retreat center and soon to open housing for youth aging out of foster care. So she has big vision about justice and how we walk that out. And so I'm really excited for y'all to hear from her more about her perspective as a woman pastor who preaches from a womanist lens. So really happy to have them on, and also just grateful to be under leadership that I deeply respect.
The other thing I think that's really interesting about this conversation that we're going to have is that Reverend Vanessa is actually the pastor of the church where she leads, whereas my aunt Sid is the executive pastor, but that means she's in the number 2 seat. And so there's a lot about how she helps keep the ministry moving forward that is informed by women's theology, but she still has to kind of defer to a Black man pastor who gratefully is very supportive of her and her walk and supportive of Black women and women in general in the pulpit. So it'll be interesting to hear those two different perspectives as well.
This will probably be the first show notes that really has more dense resources on womanism. So think of this as your mini introduction to our womanist curriculum that we're going to be working towards this season, where we're really giving you some resources where you can read, listen to podcasts, watch videos to really deepen your understanding of this framework that we use on the pod.
Absolutely. And also, I don't want to give it away too much, but there will be an opportunity on a particular platform where you'll be able to, if you play your cards right, interact with us and have a conversation, a discussion about some of the readings or what you've heard in the podcast and other episodes or this episode. And we can continue the conversation after. And not to say that you can't do that now by reaching out to us via email or reaching out to us through our Instagram's, inbox, but we'll have something a little bit more interactive and engaging for y'all to connect with so that we can continue these conversations.
Yep. Awesome. We really hope you enjoy this episode. Well, thank you, Reverend Vanessa and Reverend Cynthia, for being here. We appreciate y'all saying yes to joining us for this episode of This Womanist Work podcast. As Leitra probably shared on the podcast, we talk about womanism, and we use the definition from Alice Walker as an opportunity to center Black women in the conversation around feminism and really center our experiences and our voices. And specifically, what is the experience of Black women as it pertains to our faith experience, our engagement with politics, and what's happening in the world at large. And so we really appreciate y'all being here, both as Black women, but also as Black preachers and religious leaders. So we are really excited to have our conversation with y'all today. I think it'd be great for us to start out with y'all having an opportunity to introduce yourselves to our audience. So let's start with you, Reverend Cynthia. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, hello. Thank you all for inviting me to be a part of this podcast. I have been a viewer and a listener. And so far, I have definitely enjoyed what I have experienced. It has truly been an experience, especially because Kendra is my niece, and she got my sister on the podcast on Mother's Day. And so I was super surprised and super overjoyed as well, because I know she could be probably be more of an introvert than I am. But I'm Cynthia Layton. I came from Youngstown, Ohio. I've been in York, Pennsylvania, probably for over 30 years now. I was born and raised in the church at New Bethel Baptist Church. My father was the pastor for over 33 years or something like that. My brother now pastors the church. I am a mom and a wife. I currently serve as the executive pastor of the Cornerstone Baptist Church in York, Pennsylvania. Dr. Mark Kirsten, my senior pastor. Graduated from Youngstown State University in Youngstown, Ohio, with a bachelor's degree in labor relations and human resource management. And then from seminary at Lancaster Theological Seminary with a master's in ministry leadership. And I am currently a doctor of ministry candidate at Lancaster Theological Seminary.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. Reverend Vanessa, will you introduce yourself to our audience?
Absolutely. I already see so many connections between us. It's great to be here with you. Great to be on the podcast. I am a faithful listener.
Aww.
Be able to be with you all. I am from Chicago. I was born and raised Baptist. And I think what's interesting is that I was raised up in a Baptist church while attending a Catholic school. Early in my life, I joined a Pentecostal denomination and later found the United Church of Christ. And I am now a United Church of Christ ordained pastor and teacher. And I believe that it is in this denomination that I have come to myself, that all of my desires around social justice. I'm an attorney and I went to law school to change the world, right? The way everyone else does. But I felt like my bid for social justice and my desire for righteousness was separate from my faith. So it wasn't until I came to the United Church of Christ that I realized that this is what Jesus required of us. So this is the place where I believe that I have, when I say come to myself, that every piece comes together. I don't feel bifurcated anymore, right? It is all a part of who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm currently the pastor of Bethel Church, UCC in Houston, Texas, where I also lead a retreat center and soon to be space to house and welcome young adults coming out of the foster care system.
Yes. Many other titles.
And I did recently complete my doctorate of ministry at Garrett Seminary in spiritual direction.
Yes.
Awesome. Lots of similarities because Aunt Cent is also a Baptist girl that went to Catholic school. Ursuline High School, Youngstown, Ohio.
Yes. And quite frankly, Reverend Vanessa, you were the first person to give me language around, I believe you said it was hermeneutics of suspicion, to help me understand the questioning that I had as someone who also went to Catholic school, that I was exposed to many different faiths and ways of viewing my spirituality because I was exposed at such a young age. So it's really fascinating. And thank y'all both for your leadership in the work.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to ask a question. I mean, it was planned, but I mean, I'm even more excited to hear it because I never thought about it this way of like how being called to ministry may look differently or may not. It may be, but I can hear from y'all how like what your calling looked like when you got called to ministry and what you experienced specifically as a Black woman being called to ministry. And if you think there is something unique about that.
Yes, and growing up in the church, it's a lot different. I didn't have, that major testimony where, I was on drugs or I was out in the street or I've always been in the church. And I think sometimes we take so much for granted that it was actually harder for me to discern the call, because I was doing a lot in the ministry anyway. But it got to a point where, I believe I was in my 30s, late 30s, maybe early 40s, when I would hear sermons or be in a Bible study, and I would be getting frustrated because I'm like, they missed this whole thing. How'd they miss this passage, or how'd they miss this word, or this section is so important? Why did they leave that out? And it wasn't just, oh, they missed this, they missed that. I was actually getting angry about it. And so a lot of times our calling comes from our frustration. I tell people all the time, if they're in a meeting and they're frustrated because the meeting isn't going well, it's probably because you should be leading it. And so a lot of times, like I said, our calling comes out of our frustration. And that was the first point. And then the second point was that there was just a need. I was in a new church that had just started, and there was such a need for just organization and administration and things like that. And I just kind of rose to the occasion. And so that, coupled with my frustration with the biblical teaching, that presented the call to me. Not, and just along with, just hearing from God and all of that as well. And having others confirm the message in me as well.
Yeah. For me, the call was clearly a call to learn more, right? For me, the call wasn't to minister, to preach, or pastor. Certainly was not to pastor. And I believe that God came at me that way because I probably would have ran very much different direction if I thought the call was to preach. I was, in my mind, I was very clear that it was to learn. It was a really learn. And I recall having a conversation with a very good friend of mine who was at that time a seminary professor, because it frightened me. And I said, can I accept a call? I said, can I go to seminary and not preach?
Ooh.
Can I study and do this work, but not have to preach? Like, can ministry show up in a different way? And she's like, absolutely, right? She was a professor. She could preach, but wasn't preaching at the time. I was an attorney at the time. And so I thought, I often have clients who I pray with before they leave my office, right? Our faith often enters into the conversation with people. And maybe I'm just called to learn more so that I can, more present for God in those spaces. And so I said yes to the call, believing that I would never, ever preach, but that perhaps I would counsel people. And I was to learn more. And that's what happened in seminary. I took a preaching course because I imagined that I'd have to preach at least once in order to graduate. I wanted to do it well, right? And so I took a preaching course, and the professor said to us on that first day he would let us know if preaching was not part of what we were called to do. And I was really excited by that, right? I thought, tell me I'm not supposed to be preaching. But I'm going to do my work. I'm going to study, and I'm fine with that. And I was fully expecting him to say that. And he asked me, why I was there. And I said, I got all philosophical and deep and all this. And he said, you accept your call. All the rest of that you just talked about will go away. And I started crying. I think I cried through the whole class because I didn't want to be called to preach, right? Preachers didn't have good reputations in our house, right? They ate the last piece of chicken on Sunday with dinner. Preach. I wanted to keep practicing the law and doing what I was doing, but here I am.
Yeah.
Ooh.
That sounds so familiar.
Interesting.
Sounds so familiar.
Very.
I did not know that. I'm curious, because you all have been under the leadership of other pastors, is there anything that surprised you about leading church as a Black woman? Reverend V, I know you got some
Take a deep breath on that one. Yes, I accepted my call to ministry in a congregation where there were lots of women serving. My pastor was a Black man, but there were lots of women on, that I was sitting with and kind of being grown up in the ministry alongside of. And I didn't, in my womanist self wasn't slighted at all, I would say, in my former congregation. And I was youth pastor and minister of justice and witness. Pastoring myself, it makes me pray a lot, right? It's a different place to be. And it is, I think, as a Black woman who feels the brunt of the micro and macro aggressions, they don't leave because we're in a church space. We seem to be a microcosm of what is happening in the world. And the only difference is I'm supposed to also pray for you and love you.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Looking to take your podcast to the next level? Centering Equity Productions has your back. With our expert team, we specialize in crafting high-quality audio content that captivates your audience and boosts your brand. From concept development to marketing strategies, we handle it all so you can focus on what you love, creating amazing stories. Whether you're a seasoned podcaster or just starting out, we'll help you shine in the crowded podcasting landscape. Let's bring your vision to life and make some noise together. Contact us at info@centeringequityllc.com or www.centeringequityllc.com.
Right. Hold you in my heart while also experiencing
harm.
What it is to be a Black woman in America.
Yeah, my experience has been it's been a journey, and I come from a context where back in my home church, my dad, who was the pastor, was really ahead of his time, and so I grew up with female ministers in our pulpit, and so I didn't know anything different. I had no idea, and then I found out in later years that my dad was kicked out of their conference because he ordained women and things like that. And so when I moved away, I moved to Pennsylvania and was a part of a congregation. There was, I believe, one female minister at the time, but it was a big deal. So it was a big deal here for this particular church. And the conference that my church here belonged to, which was the National Baptist Convention, they did not, I don't want to say allow, but they did not encourage women in ministry. But I had a pastor who was progressive. And so the pastor I serve under now, definitely progressive. And so we have all female associate ministers. We don't have any men other than the pastor that I'm serving with. And I remember we had an ecumenical service that was at our church, and some other pastors came, and we were all in the office, and someone asked me for coffee. And so I'll never forget that experience, because I'm in there with the rest of the clergy. And I said, I don't get the coffee, but I'll find somebody that can get you coffee. And so that was probably my first time thinking, are you kidding me? And so, but I had to remember, the context that I was in. But I went to a seminary that is open and affirming and all-inclusive seminary. It was a gay professor who actually affirmed my calling. And I still, get chills when I think about him. He's moved on to another seminary now. But to have this man, Professor Dr. Dean Malat, truly look me in my face and say, don't you go another day without walking in your gift. Don't you go another day without walking in your calling. And I just honor him, And so he has been someone who's been, a mentor to me. And, again, back to the original question, walking as a female in ministry. And again, because of my context, I just don't see it. And I remember I was in an interview for a university, and they were interviewing me for a student pastor position. And they asked me, well, how do you feel about women in ministry? And I said, just out of my Kendra Ross spirit, I can't believe we're still talking about this. I just said that out loud. It was in my head and it came out of my mouth. And and so I know it's an issue for some, but I just walk in. I'm human. I'm a human minister, and so I just walk in that, and I don't make any apologies for being a female.
Yeah, thank you for that. I love a good Kendra Ross spirit, and kudos to Grandpa Simon
and Cherry.
Yeah, Cherry Wiley.
Woo.
For Cherry Wiley all day. Cherry Wiley's the first person I've seen really lovingly challenge the pastor on a regular basis. Yeah. So that's my blueprint. Yeah. Like when you were talking about being in Bible study and stuff and being angry. I learned that from Aunt Cherry, where she would say, "I love you, Pastor, but you're wrong." Yeah. And that's how I ended up the way I am. Partially.
And I'm not as outspoken. And I'm actually an introvert. And that's what I said. God called me in this personality. And so, I use it for his glory, but I speak out when I need to, but I'm usually, more laid back, chilled out. But it comes out every now and then.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be every day. Yeah, I was just going to, Reverend Vanessa kind of hinted at it. And I know since you all both come from seminary, you are Black, though you are human, you are still Black women. And since we are talking from the lens of womanist work, I wanted to kind of just get your origin story with womanist theology. So when did it first come to you? And what impact has it had on your faith journey? And how would you describe it in your own words, what womanist theology is?
For me, it was really organic because before I started seminary, my good friend who I mentioned earlier, Dr. Allison Geis Johnson, is a womanist ethicist. And so I was hanging with her, right? I was talking about the work that I was doing. We were in conversation quite regularly. And because womanism isn't, like a dress you put on, right? It is who you are. Once you kind of begin to identify with it, you understand it just flows through you. Yes, I am a Black woman who values the lived experience of Black women, and therefore I am a womanist, right? So I was living it and learning it before I knew what it was. And when I read Sisters in the Wilderness by Dolores Williams, right, I thought, where has this been all my life? Because her work really gave me the vocabulary, and it affirmed that what I was seeing in Scripture and the questions that I was asking and highlighting had been studied, right, and were real. And this was a perspective that needed to be brought into the space. And so that is who I am, and that's the lens through which I see the world. My husband says often, Black women are called to your work. Well, that does make sense, right? Because unlike people who aren't Black women, this is the experience. This is who I am. This is my experience, and I value it. I believe that it is worthy, right?
Yeah, and same for me. Organically, just in growing up and being around it, I didn't name it, but just from being around other women ministers and my family who have very strong women in ministry. And then when I got to seminary is when I actually was able to name it. And so I believe I've been a part of the womanist movement and womanist theology all of my Christian life. but again, just being exposed to it in seminary. And I remember reading an article by Dr. Renita Weems, A Mistress, a Maid, and No Mercy, about the story of Abraham, Sarah, and Hagar, and how she, focused on Hagar. Sarah was this privileged woman and Hagar was a slave, as an Egyptian slave. And so she focused on Hagar's story. And also, I don't know if you've heard I think it's Tracy Blackman. She preaches on What About Tamar? I don't know, Kendra, you have brought that up in a couple podcasts ago, learning about Tamar in the Bible and Samuel. And, those exposures of really pulling those stories out of the Bible, where a man may not feel comfortable or may not even see it or hear it or feel it. I guess those experiences has really pushed me further in exposing other women to the same thing that, maybe some no-nos in the Bible. And I know there's this passage, I think it's in Judges, where this, concubine is sent out to be raped. And then she's left on the doorstep of her husband, and he comes out and she's dead. And he's like, gave her away to be raped by somebody else. And so those are things that we need to hear and we need to deal with, because so many women and so many, of our people in general are, reluctant to even accept the Bible and accept the word, because we don't address those things, those hidden things that are in the word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I appreciate y'all both saying that, Reverend V. It makes me remember being when I could attend Bible study on a regular basis, and I'll be like, I have never heard this in my life. And I've been in church my whole life, all the time. I felt like I said that every Bible study. And I know that it sounds, Reverend Cynthia, you're similar to Reverend V in that you really try to name and give voice to the voiceless, to the, Reverend V, I think about when you point out women who are mentioned in story, not by name, but by presence, right? And really hold curiosity about, well, why were they even mentioned? What might this woman have been experiencing in this moment? Yes. So thank you both for your leadership and for opening that up for so many of us who've never had that opportunity to experience the Bible in that way.
Well, there's another article when you say Renita Weems that I read years ago. It was called "What of These Preaching Women?" Mm-hmm.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Are you a Black woman in middle management looking to elevate your leadership skills in a safe space? Then listen up, because I have something special just for you. Join a coaching group of like-minded women focusing on emotional intelligence, management skills, and leading in white spaces. In our group coaching sessions, you'll gain leadership skills, tools, and strategies. Plus, you'll gain a powerful network of sisters who understand your journey. No more leaning alone. Ready to take the next step? Visit www.iamkelly to learn more and join a cohort. Let's lead together.
And so if we are called in this moment, it is not because we are supposed to do the same thing that our brothers are doing. It's not because we are supposed to do something that others in society are doing. We are called in this moment to our own experiences, to find the biblical texts who get overlooked, to lift them up, and to realize that they're not all in the biblical text to be bad girls, right? They're not in the biblical text that way, but to lift up these stories. There were women there.
Certainly,
right?
Yes.
And, they are story. It's not, even though the men are counted, does not mean that we did not exist in the story. And so sometimes it just takes us to look a little bit deeper. And it's easy to skip over if that's not your interest.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And there's probably texts I won't touch that a man will, And so it does take all of us to tell the complete story.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, there's a story while the children of Israel are traveling, where the inheritances are being given out, the plots of land are being given out, and these women stand up and say, what about ours? Right? Passed away, but he was on good terms when he passed away, and we should receive his inheritance. While we had never, that wasn't part of the plan. But a woman has to be able to stand up and say, I am here. I deserve to be seen, and I deserve to be acknowledged as a child of God, just like everybody else. And so I think that's part of why we are here in this moment, to give life and breath to our experiences.
What does womanism have to offer us right now? We're in a very dark, scary time for a lot of, particularly Black women, and the world at large. So much heaviness. What does this moment have for us that you all want to lift up?
Today, in my sermon, I was talking about Jesus's response to the man at the tomb, right? And it led me to this idea that Black women are sitting out the politics of the day, right? That in ways that we have typically shown up, we haven't. And I offered something that I've been thinking about for a while, and that is that our self-care is a comorbidity. The lack of self-care is perhaps a comorbidity. And perhaps the real thing that causes our burnout and that takes us out is our failure to recover from moral injury. And we have experienced some moral injury, right? I don't think we name it that way, because we are the how I got over.
Right.
Phone keeping on.
Truly.
Come on.
Right? We don't have no time for that, right? But it is real. And so it was one election too many, right? One injury too many. And I wonder if what many of us are doing is taking time to recover. For our health and our wellness, right? Not checked out, not unavailable, but your body says, your heart and your mind say, you got to recover from this. You can't just keep coming back.
Yeah.
So I think womanism, or the ability to see the biblical story through our own eyes, gives us space to rest in this moment. It gives us a knowing that God hasn't forgotten about us, right? And is concerned about us. And I think you mentioned Hagar earlier, sister, that there are some promises to some people. There are some promises to us.
Amen.
Yeah.
Right, by name.
By name.
Yeah, I think as a woman Christian leader, my responsibility and my lived experience even now is to just pour into younger women, to pull up our little sisters, especially in the church. The church, over the last 10, 15 years hasn't been the most popular place. And, and just rediscovering the purpose of the church as a whole. And so pulling up younger women or even younger men, and just being a mentor and a discipler or whatever you want. Everybody has a different name for it. Mentor, pouring into whatever that is, whatever that looks like, so that the church can continue. Because I still believe that preaching, teaching, and the word of God will save us. Will save our communities. Will save our, cities and nation and the world. And I'm passionate about it. And, I would hate to see, the church die off. And of course, we know the word of God, says, upon this rock, I will build my church. The gates of hell shall not prevail against it. But I want to do my part in ensuring that, we have young adult women in leadership. We have young adult women at the forefront in our, community service and social justice initiatives and things like that. And so I've kind of made it a priority for me to pour into young adult women and young adult families. They all have different needs. And it's interesting because, God uses all of us uniquely. And we all have different gifts. We all come from different experiences. And, I may not be doing what Dr. Vanessa is doing. She's not doing what I'm doing. And there's, a ton of other women who are, ministering and doing their part, and just respecting our space and respecting what God is doing in us and through us.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
I was curious. So we've talked a lot on the podcast about Black women who have struggled feeling connected to church. And this week in some good church controversy, which, which we love, there was a lot happening when the National Black Convention announced that they were taking this deal with Target.
The National Baptist Convention. Let's just be clear.
Baptist Convention.
Yes.
Sorry, that's it. National Black Convention. My apologies. National Baptist Convention. And I was really interested in seeing in the number of Black women that I saw that said things like, "This is why I don't mess with church anymore. This is why we can't trust the church. Where is the church showing up for community in this moment?" And so I would love to hear from y'all, as you're thinking about mentoring and shepherding young people, what does womanism offer the church for the future of itself? And would love to hear y'all's reflections on that.
Well, I think we got to be a safe place for all people, right? The church has to be a safe space. And it doesn't feel like a safe space if I'm aware that there's this whole move against my very personage, right? And there are these corporations who have said out loud that this is who they are. And then I go to church. That doesn't feel safe.
Yeah.
And so I believe that we have to show up in all moments, but particularly in this, as the church is the place that is the safe haven and that is not afraid to speak truth to power. And I think that's what young people are also looking for.
Yeah.
I mean, go ahead, Ansa.
No, I was just going to not repeat what you said, but the safe space is important. And I was just thinking of an instance where, we have women come in our church who have, are victims of abuse and rape and things like that. And, the preacher standing up there preaching about forgiveness. Now you need to forgive your brother and sister. And it's like, well, I'm not ready to forgive the man, my uncle who raped me or whoever, whoever it is. And so just being as a woman, I think that is where we, come in and are able to listen and hear and understand that, yes, we know I wouldn't be ready to forgive him either, and agree and affirm their feelings and affirm where they are in their faith. And again, being that safe space for children as well. I was talking about the young adult population, and there's so many different, needs of each of those families, because you have, young adults who are married with small children. You have young adults who are single mothers. You have young adults who are college graduates that are professional and, living their life and are more independent. And just being able to meet all of those needs and giving them an opportunity to meet needs as well. Giving them an opportunity to serve, because, those who are coming into church now, those who actually come in the doors, they want something to do, and they want something to do that matters. Whatever that is, whether it's, food drives, clothing drives, being out in the community, participating in things, going out on Capitol Hill, participating in marches and things like that. They're not looking for just a place to come on Sunday and spend an hour of their time when their kids got baseball practice and all that kind of stuff. And so it's just being able to meet them where they are, and meeting their needs where they are.
And I would just also add that womanist theology sets us free.
For sure.
We proclaim this liberating gospel, and while at the same time binding women in
Mm-hmm.
every way that we can.
Yes.
And it takes someone in the womanist thought to understand that womanish ain't wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So me as my little self growing up in this space, right, being this wise little girl, I'm not fast, right? I'm not unlovable. I'm womanish, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Yeah.
This person, but it sets me free to be. And we just, I think sometimes in the church, we fail people generally, women, men, young people, when we have so many policies and so much that is not freeing.
Yeah.
Right. And so I can't come as I am as long as what I am is X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that, brought to mind, Reverend Vanessa, something I've been thinking about as y'all were talking about, like, feeling like as women in the church, like being an alternative to kind of like some harmful theology, doesn't mean that all women in the pulpit are free and or speaking through or teaching through a womanist lens.
Mm-hmm.
But I do find that a lot of women who are in the pulpit who do work from a womanist framework have been really transparent about a lot of unlearning and undoing they've had to do with like harmful theology for themselves and others. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering what that looks like. What are some things you've had to unlearn? And then how do you, this might be the hard part, is like, I know you're the alternative, right? Like the pastors in the pulpit telling people to forgive, and you have this other point of view, but how are you then able to influence those pastors with some of this, also still being a woman and still being in that same position in a church that sometimes clings on to some of this harmful theology?
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to be able to, speak to my pastor about a lot of things that was said unintentionally, didn't mean any harm. But, just being able to say, when you said this, do you realize how it could have been interpreted by someone else who's going through something else in their life? And, he just happens to be one that is open enough to hear and, think about it and say, oh, you know what, you're right. I need to make that right. And, I know on a Sunday morning, you can't stop and ask questions and things like that. But I teach Bible study. And when I'm in Bible study, if the pastor is teaching, we're able to stop, ask questions, make comments and things like that. It is a little bit of I would say, struggle. When I first came out of seminary, I was having this frustration and this fight with myself over what I can expose to a congregant who has not really been biblically, theologically educated. And some of the things that I've learned in seminary that were eye-opening to me, because, for some folks, the Bible is the Bible. They are growing up on the, reading the Bible that their grandmas and aunties and grandfathers have read to them. And so sometimes it's hard for them to hear those things. And so my struggle initially out of seminary was, what do I expose the congregation to in the Bible? And that was a difficult thing for me because, there's a lot of, inconsistencies geographically, even with, dates and times and things like that. And so I'm careful because I don't want to, I guess, ruin anybody or scare anybody with some of the knowledge. So I'm just have to be very discerning on what I teach and how I teach it.
I would say, I think we can't shrink from what we know.
It's hard.
And what we I think that's why Kelly's saying every time she was in Bible study, she's like, I didn't know that. Like, I never heard it quite that way. I was introduced to the Gospel of Mary of Magdala while taking a class on abuse in seminary. And I remember asking my professor, who's a womanist, I said, can I preach from this book? Right? She said, maybe once. Right? Because you're probably going to preach from this gospel. That'll be your last time preaching at that church. Right? But I found ways to weave in what the Gospel of Mary Magdalene says. Mm-hmm. I can be found quoting from the Quran in mm-hmm. worship, because I am talking about this decision that Moses' mother takes to put her baby on the water. Mm-hmm. And our text is very limited in telling us how she comes to that, mm-hmm. right? Where their spirit shows up to her, the we God shows up and says, place the baby there, for surely we shall return him to you. Mm-hmm. Right. So I, probably because I am pastor of my congregation, right, I feel very comfortable writing about this, talking about it in Bible study and preaching it, so that we understand. I want us to be free. Mm-hmm. And I want us to take advantage of, the vastness that God has for us, and sort of expand our vision and expand our capacity of what is real and what is possible for us. Because I think that's what young people are looking for. Mm-hmm. My youngest daughter will call me often and say, Mom, could you talk to my friend, because they don't want to listen to this particular music because they think it's satanic, right? Would you have a conversation with them? I'm not getting between your friend and her mama, right? Now, if your friend comes in and wants to have a conversation, that's a different story. Comes in, if she shows up in a space where I'm speaking, she'll hear what it is I have to say. Mm-hmm. But, let the chains go. Like, let us release ourselves. Mm-hmm.
So, we've talked a lot about your practice in the pulpit, mm-hmm. but I'm really interested in what are your personal practice, your own spiritual practices that you do for yourself to keep yourself. So those moments, Reverend Vanessa, when you have to deal with folks who are being microaggressive, but you still got to love them and still got to pray for them. Like, what are your own spiritual and personal practices that keep you centered?
I go back to a practice that I have come to learn my grandmother started. When my grandmother had a lot on her heart or mind, she walked through the house humming and cleaning. When you could tell when things were really rough, right? She would walk and hum for a long time, and they knew not to bother her. My mother did the same thing, and she would do it in the middle of the night. She would work all day, take care of us in the evening, put us to bed, and get up in the middle of the night and have her time cleaning her house with God, right? Mm-hmm. And so, Saturday mornings were gospel music and cleaning the house. And so I found that even for myself, a mental health day for me, particularly earlier in my career, even when I was practicing law, a mental health day for me meant staying home, turning the music up really loudly, right? The gospel music, and talking to God all day while I cleaned my house. Like I think it's almost as if whatever is all that I had taken in that needs to be released, I've got to do something physical to get it out. I think that's where the cleaning comes, and this constant connection with God. Mm-hmm. I've also learned how to let go of what is placed on me. So whether it's people that I'm praying for, someone that I'm sitting with, or even the harm that someone wants to throw at me, at the end of my day, I sit with all those things. I write them down, right? Sometimes I write them on a rock, and I give them away to this rock and place them in a bowl. I pray and let it go, because it's too much to hold on to. Mm-hmm. And I found very early on that if I held it, it was going to come up and come out. And so I've had to find ways to actually release those things on a daily basis.
How about you, Aunt?
Yep. Well, I walk. I usually walk at least 4 to 5 days a week. And so that's my meditation time. Sometimes I have a walk with a walking partner, but sometimes I walk alone. And so that's usually my time to have my conversation with God, but I'm doing more listening than talking. And so that's my form of self-care. And I like concerts. I love music. I like hanging out with my friends just to wind down. I'm also a teacher. And so, between teaching all day and then, serving my church, sometimes I can get peopled out. And so I have to, take a step back. And again, God called this introvert to this type of vocation and ministry. And so I'm usually wore out by the time I get home. It's a lot. And so, and then when I get home, I can just relax. And sometimes I'm not doing anything or cooking, things like that, just to be able to shed some of that stuff. But I worked backwards. It was interesting that I began serving as a young adult in ministry, and I put myself out there because I knew that if I decided to serve, I was going to have to learn about what I was doing. And so I knew people would be relying on me. And so that was even more motivation for me to, go to school and learn the Bible and just continue to be, better each day, because I knew that there would be people relying on me. And I think that's what gives me energy, which is interesting, but I love solving problems. And so, that worked in my secular job, and it also, works in ministry because things come up all the time. And so I think that has been the most push and the most motivating for me. And I actually enjoy it. Like, I enjoy ministry. I love it. I would do it for free. Thank God that I am on staff, but and I would never say that out loud to my church. I do this for free, because they'd be like, all right. But I would do it for free because I do love it that much. And it's, it's just ironic that I love people, but I prefer to be alone. So whatever that looks like, but I just know it's God's call on my life that allows me to do the things that I do.
This introvert is so resonating with everything you just said. So thank you for saying that, because I don't think we think of preachers and teachers as introverts, right? And what it may cost you to show up in this work. That is different and unique. So thank you for naming that. I really love that you both are learners, and that you are just great examples of people who are both humble but confident, right? I think a lot of times in women, we think of humility as meekness, and being timid or docile, and y'all, neither of y'all present in that way. And I just love the mix of those two energies and what they mean for the people who are under your leadership. So thank you. Yeah.
I do too. And I think now I'm going to sound real churchy. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't take this opportunity, because both of you have shared that, like, y'all were reluctant to the call. I feel like a lot of men say that, and please forgive me, but I really believed y'all. like I'm not saying men aren't reluctant, but in the way that y'all talked about, like, we literally went to, like, Reverend, I went to seminary because I wanted to learn, and on Cent being like, I'd already been serving, so like I wasn't really paying attention to the call, but like there's these are really interesting times, right? But there's a young Black woman right now who probably feels called, but doesn't feel like there's room for them. It just, it's like the world keeps moving, but in a lot of ways, in a lot of church spaces, not a lot has changed. So someone's sitting in the pew right now, probably really quiet. Yeah. So what message, besides your own testimony, which is great and important for both of you, but what message would you share with a Black woman sitting right now trying to figure out if this aggravation she has, or this unsatiated desire to learn more about the word, what would you say to her?
I would say yield to it. Be really in a discerning process. Speak to someone that you trust about it, and don't be limited to pulpit and church ministry. Right now, I'm looking for someone in my church, some young people to minister and go to the football games and basketball games and baseball games that happen on Fridays and Saturdays that keep people from, having the time or the energy to come to church on Sunday. And so I want you to put on a sweatsuit. I want you to put on your jeans or whatever you have on and go to them and be there as a support, and so, what a wonderful thing it would be for a family to look up and see, oh, that lady goes to my church, and here she's not in church, but she's here at the game supporting our children. And so, I would say to be who you are, you don't have to be anybody else because God has called you for a reason. And, we got, 79, 89, 99, people in the pulpit on Sunday. And the world is still hungry for the living bread. And so I would say just be who you are, and whatever God is calling you to do, don't limit it because you don't see that anywhere. God may be calling you to do something very, very unique, and embrace that.
I second that emotion. And I also say that because you're called doesn't mean you're relegated to sensible shoes and white stockings.
Lord knows.
God, please.
God knows who you are and calls you because of that, right? And that you can serve in this way and have joy.
Yeah.
Right. Barbara Holmes, just a little bit before she passed away recently, asked a question. What if the entrance into heaven was dependent upon your level of joy? Right? So not on all the things that sometimes in church we list, the things that you should and should not do, but what if it's dependent upon your level of joy?
Wow.
And that's been sitting with me. When you think about the biblical text where Jesus preaches prays his last prayer before he ascends into heaven. He prays for his disciples three things. One is for their protection. One is for their unity, that they may all be one. And then finally for their joy. And that lights me up, right? Yeah. That I'm supposed to be joyful. Like this, we talk about joy as resistance. Absolutely. So, to a young woman who was feeling some stirrings in her spirit that might feel very scary, that to listen carefully and to understand that she doesn't give up who she is in order to serve.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Last question I think we have for y'all today. What would be your altar call for this moment? What is the invitation?
Thinking about that one.
It's okay. Take your time.
I feel like
you sing the altar call song?
I think it's always the same. Let's journey together, right? Let's take this together towards whatever it is that God is calling us together to do, right? God allows you and I, or to be in this conversation together. Allows the four of us to be here today. So let's say yes to the journey, and see what the end shall be.
Yes, I would echo that and say, come and join us in this work. Come and be a part of this work. And I believe sometimes we get caught up in what it means to be a good Christian. And there's an author by the name of, his last name is McNamus. I can't forget his first name. The book is called Makers of Fire. And he said, our higher calling is not to become a better Christian, but it's to be a better human. And a lot of times we like to put levels on our Christianity. Oh, she's a real saved, or she's, such a good Christian. And God just calls us to be Christian, which is believing that he died and he rose. And our highest calling is to be a decent human being. And so, my call is to, I guess my altar call would be to just join us in this work, that we can, just help make the world around us a better place.
Thank y'all so much for being on the pod. This has been really beautiful.
Thank you for having us. This was a great conversation.
It was.
Awesome.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it. And I had to pull up Kelli, the Going Out song. Shirley Caesar. I'll say yes, Lord, yes, to your will and to your way. Yes, I appreciate it. I appreciate you. This will be somebody's Sunday sermon that day when it comes out, because our podcast comes out on Sundays.
Okay. Yes.
And somebody will be like, "Oh, I didn't make it to church today," but like, that's all right. I listened to This Womanist Work, and I got a word. I got a couple of words.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Awesome.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
We didn't get a chance to ask them about their takeaways, so I wanted us to wrap up with our takeaways from the episode. What do you think, Ken?
It was funny. One of my major takeaways, and this is not at all saying that I'm called to anything, because folks have had me going to seminary, becoming a preacher, and folks have had me becoming a politician and a leader. But it really resonated with me, like, on both ends, both Rev and Vanessa talking about, like, going to learn, and not wanting to go preach. Because at one point I had thought about going to seminary, but I have recently paid my student loans off, and I never want to see another tuition bill again in my life. So I'm gonna have to have my own seminary at home, reading books. And then, Aunt Cynthia also talking about being frustrated in Bible study and sermon. That's been me my whole life. And I particularly remember at Brown Memorial, I'll call it out, with Reverend Clinton Miller, who I'm friends with, but who, I was never shied away from, like, letting him know if I felt a way about something. And, Aunt Cynthia talks about it, the story of Tamar. And I remember he was talking about everybody else, right? David and the brothers and all this other stuff. And I remember lifting my hands in Bible study and saying, what about Tamar? And I've had so many of those what about Tamar moments in church, in Bible study. And so it was just affirming to hear that, but also put in perspective the frustration that they must have. Because like Reverend Vanessa said, not only does she have to deal with the microaggressions, she still got to love and hug on them people and pray for them. Where I can stay home at Bedside Baptist and just be mad in the comfort of my own home and watch YouTube. Mm-hmm. So it put a lot of things in perspective, and the cost of, you mentioned, Kelli, of being a Black woman in leading in these spaces. So, but also the joy, right? At the end of the day, let's take this joyful walk together.
Yeah. I mean, one of my takeaways is actually really personal, and I don't think I really said this out loud, but I really reflected on the fact that sometimes I'm not motivated to get up and go be in church because of how I've seen the micro and the macro aggressions that she has experienced. It gets exhausting to watch people disrespect your pastor, and to not respect their wishes, their leadership, their authority, because they want things done a certain way. And I'm like, I can listen to Reverend Vanessa's sermon anytime. I don't have to deal with the rigmarole. And I just think that, even with a womanist pastor, the church is still going to be full of humans who are going to human. And sometimes you just get really exhausted. And so I'm just really, I think, going to reflect on what that means for me, because I really do enjoy church when it's a healthy space. But yeah, that was my takeaway.
Every once in a while, you might have to pop out, Kelli, and show them, because, I'm not into the whole armor bearer thing necessarily, but like every once in a while, they need to know that Reverend Vanessa got a holy, but will wholly let you know, back someone with her back in the space. So, but I respect that. I totally understand.
Yeah. Interesting.
But it's just beautiful. I mean, not to prolong it, but it's beautiful that you said that Reverend Vanessa is the reason why you were able to like step foot in church again. Because that's kind of on the journey I'm on. Like, I still am very much tied to and love all the churches that have formed me, including my church here in Pittsburgh, Macedonia, New Bethel, my uncle's church, my former grandfather's church, that used to be my grandfather's church, and also Brown in Brooklyn. Those three churches have been formative in my life, but I don't have a current space where I felt I can go on a regular basis and feel safe not that I feel unsafe in those spaces, but I there's a way that I there's something I need to be able to experience and feel that I can't get in those places on a regular basis right now.
Yeah.
So
it's hard.
It's coming.
It is. I believe. Awesome.
I told you I'm gonna be up there with the Unitarian people singing "We Shall Overcome." If that's what I gotta do.
Oh, I love it so much. Yeah. Having been raised in church and actually have enjoyed the experience of church, there is something that you miss when you don't have a faith community that you feel like you can be fully present for.
Mm-hmm.
That has all the elements that you miss, right? The singing, the community, all the things. So yeah. Real talk.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for listening to this episode. We can't wait to hear your thoughts and reactions.
Indeed. Thank you.
Nobody asked, but my takeaway is these shirts. What's going on with the merch?
Yes, thank you for the reminder. So y'all, merch is coming to you. I'm wearing the I Too Am the Church shirt, which I'm excited for us to be able to share, repping our various pride colors. And then Kendra is rocking our standard This Womanist Work podcast shirt, which will be available also on tote bags. Our men listeners will also be able to grab a shirt as well. So stay tuned for those coming to y'all really soon. As in link in bio.
Yeah. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.